Hello everybody, today we are at the Franklin House here in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania on Market Square in Schaefferstown, the main square. Do you know that this place was not always known as the Franklin House? In fact, it was once known as the King George. In 1746, when this was built, this was originally called Heidelberg. This square was set up by Alexander Schaeffer, who Schaefferstown is named after, the town's founder, and he actually built this place as an inn, general store, amongst other things that fit for this square, because Market Square here was actually originally, this was a meeting place of the north-south route, which went from Conrad Weiser's homestead, and Conrad Weiser was one of the most important men in Pennsylvania at that stage. He was important for the negotiations with the different Native American tribes. He was also a judge, amongst other things, but one of the most important men at that time. So from his homestead in the north, this route would have went the whole way down to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which at that time in the 1700s would have been one of the major centers of Pennsylvania at that stage, one of the major towns. It also would have went past Elizabeth Furnace, which at the time was owned by Baron von Stiegel, who has the Stiegel Tower, which is down in Water Park, and also his family owned a house up in here. So he was a popular figure in this town. The east-west route would have went from Ephrata, Pennsylvania, which was very important because of the cloister, and it would have went west the whole way out to Harris Ferry, as it was known then. Eventually it would become Harrisburg, our capital here in Pennsylvania. This also would have went through Cornwall Iron Furnace, which at that time would have been the most important place of business in the area. So this square, you would have had all these different taverns, inns, general stores. On every single corner here was a general store at the time, including a tavern that still today, the historic Schaefferstown LLC, does operate at times throughout the year. They'll open it up and operate it as a tavern from the 1700s. It's actually quite a neat experience, and I'll let you guys see in the background the yellowish house there. That is the Gremlin Rex house, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly. Franklin House was not always known as the Franklin House. When this was built in 1746 by Alexander Schaeffer, this was known as the King George, because you have to remember at that period of time, we were still loyal subjects of the British Crown. So places like this, an inn, a tavern, it was very popular to name them after kings and queens. In fact, a lot of towns from back then, their main streets were usually called King Street and Queen Street. For instance, Annville, Pennsylvania, the north-south route was King Street, and the east-west would have been Queen Street. So because we were loyal subjects, it was very popular to name these places of gathering after the king. So this was known as the King George until that thing called the American Revolution, when King George was no longer very popular. I wonder why. So they don't have an exact time period, but it was named the George Washington, probably for a good 5 or 6, maybe 7 years, 8 years, 10 years even. And then they decided to change the name after another one of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania, and ever since then has been known as the Franklin House. The building itself has changed over the years. Right now it is an amazing tavern and restaurant. Actually, some very cool haunted stories about this place. This is one of those restaurants. I've eaten here once. My good friend Ed and his fiance Michelle brought me here. Really amazing place. It's just such a beautiful place, and I'll take the camera around it a little bit. But you know, you have a place here that it's coming up not 20 some years, and it's 300 years old. The third floor was added at a later time, but a lot of history, a lot of ghost stories. I think in the second floor there's some weird things that happen, but this is an amazing place to come and check out here, the Franklin House. So if you get the chance to visit the Lebanon Valley here, come out to Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania, check out this cool square. A lot of really cool buildings. Just down the road there you can see is Heidelberg Hall, which was originally called the Weagley Mansion. That's a really neat place. You got St. Luke's, I believe it's Lutheran Church, right down the road. That has a ton of history. They actually have a historic marker right down there. And just the amazing history that is here in historic Schaefferstown. It's a beautiful area to walk, just to see all the beautiful old stone houses and the history. And Franklin House is a must stop here in the Lebanon Valley. Great restaurant, great stories, great fellowship. They'd love to have you here. And thanks for coming along on another adventure, talking about a cool place here in Lebanon Valley, here in Pennsylvania, here in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania. It's Franklin House Tavern and Restaurant. As always, everybody, thanks for coming along, and we'll see you all about town. So as promised, I sort of forgot myself there for a second. I wanted to show you guys around the place. Like, you just see how stunning this is. I always love the sign here as well, Franklin House sign with Benjamin Franklin's picture there in the center. But it's just such a neat, and like I said, it's just such a neat area. I'll show you a little bit of the square as well. But you can just look down the side of the building and just how neat this is. But right over there is the Weagley Mansion, or Heidelberg Hall as it's called now. They actually have bought this as well. This was the general store that William Weagley eventually owned. He started out, I believe, as a worker there, and eventually worked his way up through to eventually own this store, to building that extraordinary mansion. And then all these there's another really neat mansion. It's sort of hidden behind the trees. This one's a neat one too, but like there was a general store there, several general stores here, and then you have St. Luke's, and then some cool stories about this bank that we'll tell you at some point as well. There's an infamous, they think the guy was stealing from the bank, but it was a really interesting story. And you have the Grembling Rex House, which does get open. That is a tavern house from the 1700s, and it is set up very much as a tavern house. And occasionally, especially around Christmas, they actually open it up to the public to be able to experience a meal, what a meal would have been like at that time period in a tavern of that era. So I haven't not gotten a chance to do that yet, but at some point I am planning on doing that. I will be working with Historic Schaefferstown LLC down at the Alexander Schaeffer farm, which is down that way. I do apologize for the noise, but this is a pretty busy square. And just down the road here, I will acknowledge as well, for Historic Schaefferstown LLC, is the Brendel Museum. We have visited there. That was the old patriotic order of the Sons of America. And you just see just such a beautiful, beautiful place. But once again, Franklin House is a place well worth checking out. There's a lot of great stories. I'll tell you guys the ghost stories in our haunted history at some point with this place. But you just think about the history, almost 300 years. It's extraordinary. And there's so many places like this here in the Visit Lebanon Valley, just to come here and experience. And like I said, just here in Schaefferstown, there's so many neat things to come visit. But you want a good meal, come here to the Franklin House. So once again, I'll say thank you guys for coming along, and thank you as always, and we'll see you all about town.